Imagine being humiliated, kicked out of the factory where you worked every single day just to survive. Now imagine walking back into that same place, not as an employee, but as the owner. This is the story of someone who turned pain into power, failure into victory, and proved that no one can stop a destiny built with courage. Stay with me until the end. You need to hear what happened next. And don't forget, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, leave your comment, and share this video so it can inspire more people. Because today, you'll understand that nothing is impossible.
He was fired coldly, as if years of effort meant nothing. A curt warning, an indifferent glance, and the door closed behind him. He walked slowly to the factory gate, eyes full of tears and his head full of doubts. That departure was not just professional. It was a deep wound in the soul. Each step echoed on the concrete floor, as if marking the end of an era. The distant sounds of the machines, which once represented routine and livelihood, now seemed to mock his silence. No one came to say goodbye. No words of thanks, no handshake, just emptiness. In his memory, flashes of cold early mornings, missed birthdays, overtime hours he had offered without asking for anything in return. All of that now seemed ridiculous in the face of the coldness of a "you're dismissed." He was no longer needed, and that hurt more than any salary cut or unfair criticism. As he crossed the gate, he paused for a moment. He looked back, not at the factory, but at everything he had left there: time, energy, pieces of himself. He knew he had to move forward, but in that instant, all he could feel was the pain of having been discarded, as if invisible. The dismissal was the full stop at the end of a story written with sacrifice. But perhaps, even with a wounded soul, it was still possible to start over. For days, he felt defeated. The world seemed to spin without him, as if his absence had left no mark at all. Breakfast lost its taste, the days lost their rhythm, and the nights became too long for someone carrying the weight of disappointment. He looked at his own hands, the same hands that for so many years had built, fixed, carried, and now seemed empty. He heard advice from all sides. Forget it, move on, it's just a job. But it wasn't just a job. It was part of who he was. Still, on the outside, he only nodded silently, as one who accepts defeat. But inside, something different was growing. Weak at first, almost imperceptible, but with each day it grew firmer, clearer, more determined. It whispered something no one had imagined, not even himself, until then. One day I'll come back here, not as an employee, but as the owner. The idea, bold and unlikely, became a promise. Every swallowed tear turned into fuel, every word of discouragement, a step upward. The pain was not buried, it was transformed. Because there are defeats that don't end story. They only mark the exact point where a turning point begins. And he had already decided his would be unforgettable. With no money, no support, and his self-esteem shaken, he decided not to give up. The fall had been hard, but not enough to bury him. He rolled up his sleeves, wiped away the tears that still stubbornly fell, and stepped out onto the street. Pride stayed at home, or maybe it had been transformed into courage. He washed cars under the scorching sun, with calloused hands and a face marked by effort. He handed out flyers that few read, facing indifferent glances. He sold sweets door to door, confronting the weight of prejudice and doubt. Every day was a battle, but he never bowed his head. There was one difference, a force invisible but unbreakable. He carried a purpose as firm as steel. It wasn't just about surviving, it was about building. Every coin counted at the end of the day was a brick in the foundation of the future he dreamed of. No matter how far he was from his goal, he knew the direction. And with that, he already had more than many. He had a reason. While the world saw just another street vendor, he saw an entrepreneur in the making. Every no he received was fuel. Every hard step was part of the road leading to something greater. Because those who have a true purpose aren't measured by what they lost, but by what they're willing to do to take it back. He studied at night, when the city fell silent, and the day's commitments finally gave him a break. Sitting at the simple table in his small room, his body tired but his mind awake, he dove into books, videos, articles, anything that could teach him about entrepreneurship, leadership, finance, strategy. While many slept, he dreamed awake. But not with fantasies, with plans. He dreamed of ideas that could come to life. Businesses he didn't yet have the means to start but already knew how to manage. He imagined meetings, goals, clients, products, strategies, all with the clarity of someone who doesn't wait for luck but prepares for opportunity. With every page read, every video watched, every note scribbled in his worn notebook, he built a new version of himself. Stronger, wiser, more prepared. He knew, knowledge doesn't solve everything, but it's what separates impulse from decision. And if the future was still uncertain, at least he would ensure that when the time came, he wouldn't be just a dreamer anymore. He would be someone ready to make it happen. He was rejected by many, underestimated by others, ignored by most. He heard disguised laughter, empty advice, criticism disguised as concern. But he never stopped. While others pointed fingers, he pointed to the future. He didn't fight back. He didn't explain himself. He just kept going. He worked in silence, head down and heart on fire, while the results, those yes, made noise. Every small achievement was an answer, every steady step, a message. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone, only to himself. On hard days, when fatigue pressed in and doubt hovered, it was faith in his purpose that kept him standing. Not blind faith, but confidence built with sweat, learning, and persistence. He knew no one saw what he saw, and that was okay. It was the price of dreaming big in a world that settles for little. He walked narrow paths, but with a grand destination on the horizon. And while many still mocked or doubted, he kept going, steady, focused, unstoppable. Because those who have a true purpose don't need an audience, they only need time. Years later, he finally opened his small business. It was nothing luxurious. A rented room, simple walls, used furniture, and a handwritten sign hanging at the entrance. To many, it went unnoticed. But to him, it was the beginning of a dream he had never stopped living. There, in that cramped space, beat the same heart of someone who dreamed big. Every corner carried a story. Every detail was the result of effort, sleepless nights, silent battles against discouragement and doubt. He didn't expect big profits right away, but he offered great value from the very first service. He treated every customer like a king, with respect, attention, and gratitude. He knew that more than selling, it was necessary to earn trust, and he did so with excellence. Each day was a new chance, not just to grow, but to show that he was on the right path. He didn't see that small business as an end, but as a beginning. The foundation of something bigger, a symbol that it had been worth not giving up when everything seemed lost. And so, with humility in his eyes and fire in his heart, he began to write the next chapter of his story, this time with his own hands. He slept on the company floor more than once. He used his backpack as a pillow and his coat as a blanket. His exhausted body begged for rest, but his mind never stopped, always thinking about the next step, the next bill, the next customer. He cried silently in the bathroom, hiding his tears from the team. He knew he had to be strong, or at least appear to be. He carried the weight of decisions, uncertainties, and responsibilities that few saw. But even in that, his most fragile moment, he never thought about giving up. Because for him, the pain was temporary. But the promise he made to himself was eternal. He promised he would succeed, that he would win with honesty, hard work, and faith, that he would prove, not to others, but to himself, that every effort would be worth it. He didn't just want success, he wanted overcoming. He wanted meaning. And it was that silent promise, made on the hardest days, that kept him standing. When strength ran out, it pushed him forward. When hope faded, it reminded him of the why. Because those who carry a true purpose may fall, but never stay down for long. Little by little, the business grew. Nothing happened overnight. It was step by step, client by client, day after day. One client became two, two became 10. And so, through word of mouth, with good service and respectful treatment, trust began to spread. Trust grew alongside revenue. But more than numbers, what increased was respect. People started to see more than just a company. They saw commitment, seriousness, and passion for what was done. And he kept going strong, as always, with honesty, hard work, and vision. He didn't look for shortcuts. He preferred the harder, but right, path. He invested in improvements, cared for the team, listened to customers, learned from mistakes. He didn't just want to sell, he wanted to leave a mark. And he did. Over time, that small business, which started with used furniture and a handwritten sign, became a reference in the region. It was sought after, respected, admired. But he didn't let it go to his head. He knew where he came from, and he knew there was still much to conquer. Because those who build with truth grow with roots, and strong roots don't shake. They hold up big dreams. One day, he received news that stopped his heart for a few seconds. The factory where he was humiliated was going bankrupt. Unpayable debts, poor management, accumulated lawsuits, and the doors almost closing. The same company that once discarded him without remorse was now sinking in silence. The same cold way it had treated him. What for many was the end, for him was a sign. There was no revenge in his eyes, no wounded pride. There was only clarity. This was the opportunity he had waited for years, and unlike before, now he was ready, prepared, mature, with knowledge, experience, capital, and above all, a vision no one had when he was just another employee. He remembered the day he walked out through that factory gate, eyes full of tears and soul marked. But now, it was different. He wasn't coming back broken. He was coming back as the master of his own destiny. And in that moment, he understood. Some doors close so that, at the right time, we can walk through them as transformed people. And he was no longer the same. Now, he was the answer time had been waiting for. He gathered his team, fine-tuned every detail, and spoke with investors who believed not only in the numbers, but in the story behind them. Then, with a racing heart and steady hands, he made the offer. It wasn't just a purchase. It was a milestone, a step that carried years of struggle, pain, and overcoming. The negotiation lasted weeks. There were intense meetings, adjustments, analyses, doubts hanging in the air. But he didn't back down. He knew the value of that opportunity. Not just financial, but emotional, symbolic, historical. And in the end, the impossible happened. The factory was his. The same one that once coldly let him go now bore his name on the deed. The same door that closed in his face years ago now opened with respect. He didn't come back as an employee, as he had promised. He came back as the owner. There were no victory shouts, no revenge speeches, just silence, and a deep look at the place where everything began, and began again. It was the cycle closing, or better yet, a new cycle beginning. On the day of the reopening, he walked through the same gate that once saw him leave defeated, but now with firm steps and his head held high. Each step echoed a story of struggle and overcoming. He looked at every corner of that place, the hallways, the machines, the room he had often seen from afar, from outside. There, where he once cried silently, he now smiled. It wasn't a smile of revenge or bitterness. It was the smile of someone who understands that the pain, no matter how bitter, was the fuel to get there. He felt gratitude. Gratitude for the difficult path life forced him to walk, for the lessons hidden in the falls, for the sleepless nights, and for the learning that the struggle brought. He knew none of this would have been possible without those moments of pain. At that moment, he was not just the owner of the factory. He was the owner of his own story, a story of courage, resilience, and faith. And more than that, he was living proof that sometimes true victory lies in never giving up on yourself. He didn't put anyone down. That was never his style. On the contrary, he made a point of extending a hand to those who, like him, had faced hardships within those walls. He hired former colleagues, many of them forgotten or underestimated, and gave them a new chance, a real chance. He invested in the infrastructure, improved the environment, brought modernity and comfort. But most importantly, he cared deeply about creating a space where everyone was heard, respected, and valued. He knew that a company is made of people, not just machines or numbers. He didn't come back to prove something to others. He came back to honor what he believed. He returned with the certainty that dignity, hard work, and respect are forces greater than any adversity. And it was this belief that now guided every decision, every gesture, every achievement. Because true victory isn't in who knocks others down, but in who lifts them up and helps others grow along the way. The old gray and gloomy factory, which for so long seemed trapped in a past of discouragement, was now alive, vibrant, full of color and purpose. The worn-down walls had been renewed, the spaces came to life, and a new energy filled the air. The machines started running again, creaking like an orchestra announcing the rebirth of that place. The sound of work echoed through the halls, bringing hope where once there was only silence. The team grew once more, bringing together old acquaintances and new talents, all united by a common mission. It was no longer just a job. It was a place of belonging, learning, and shared achievements. What was once a bitter memory, pain, and rejection was now transformed into a symbol of overcoming. That factory, which once was the stage for hidden tears, became a living monument to the strength of those who never gave up. There, Among machines and people, a new story was growing, a story of new beginnings, courage, and faith in the future. His story spread throughout the entire city, like a strong wind that can't be ignored. From mouth to mouth, from street to street, his name stopped being just that of a businessman and became that of a true example. People began seeking him not only for his business success, but for the strength he carried, for the courage of someone who faced defeat, humiliation, and yet rose stronger than ever. He started giving talks at schools, fairs, and events, opening his heart and memory to share his journey. He spoke not only of achievements, but also of falls, difficult nights, and hidden tears. He carried with him living proof that the impossible is nothing more than something that just takes a little longer to happen. His story became inspiration, fuel for those still fighting, hope for those thinking of giving up. Because he knew that more than success, what truly matters is persistence, and that, indeed, is capable of transforming lives. He made it clear to everyone who would listen. The dismissal was not the end. It was actually the beginning of everything. It was necessary to lose the ground beneath his feet to learn how to build wings, to fall, feel the pain of the fall, understand the emptiness. All of this was necessary for him to discover his true strength, the kind that only arises in adversity. What seemed like a cruel punishment, a door closing without explanation, was actually the greatest blessing disguised as pain, an invitation to start over, to reinvent himself, to look within and find the courage no one imagined existed. He didn't deny the suffering, but he knew that from it sprang the seed of transformation. And it was this way, through tears and struggle, that the man capable of flying higher than he ever dreamed was born. Today, he looks back with pride, not anger. Every difficulty faced, every fall endured, every moment of doubt served to shape his character, strengthen his resilience, and broaden his worldview. If he had stayed in that factory as an employee, settled into the routine and apparent security, he would never have become who he truly is today. The pain that once seemed his greatest obstacle was, in fact, the fuel that drove him to go further, dream bigger, and fight with greater courage. He understands that life is not defined by a single chapter, and that sometimes the greatest challenges are the true teachers. That's why he holds no grudges. He holds gratitude. Gratitude for every test, for every moment that made him grow. Because only those who face the fire transform into steel, and he today is living proof of that. In his own words, he always said, "You can take away my job, my salary, my security, but you will never take away my courage to start over." That courage, silent, stubborn, unshakable, was the strength that kept him steady when everything seemed to fall apart. It was what pushed him forward on difficult nights, at closed doors, and through doubtful looks. And it was that same courage that transformed him, not just a fired employee, but the owner of an empire built with sweat, faith, and determination. An empire born from the will to never give up, from the ability to rise stronger with every fall. Because in the end, what no one can truly take away is the courage to fight and the dream to win. And he knew that from day one. That promise made in the silence of pain was fulfilled with sweat, tears, and courage. Every step taken, every battle faced, carried the weight of that intimate commitment, born in the hardest hours. He returned as the owner, not just of the factory, but of his own destiny. He didn't wait for an inheritance, nor rely on luck or shortcut. Everything he achieved was the result of tireless effort, daily persistence, and unwavering faith in himself. He inherited nothing. He built everything. And that construction, made brick by brick, was much more than a business. It was living proof that the strength to change one's own story lives within those who choose not to give up. And today, when he walks through the company's corridors, he doesn't see just machines and production. He sees much more than that. He sees every step of that long journey, the stumbles that nearly brought him down, the painful sacrifices he had to make, the silent battles he won day after day. Every corner holds a memory. Every space carries a piece of his story. There isn't just a factory there. It's a living story, beating strong, made of struggle, courage, and transformation. And he knows, what he built is not just concrete and steel. It is concrete proof that it's possible to turn pain into strength, failure into opportunity, and dreams into reality. And if he could leave just one lesson for the world, it would be this: never underestimate the power of someone who was doubted. Because those who have been knocked down, when they decide to get up, rise stronger than ever. That strength, born from pain and determination, turns falls into lessons and defeats into victories. It is the fire that forges true winners, those who, despite everything, refuse to give up. And it is this silent courage that moves the world.